guys, pull up a seat and get cozy. This is going to be a little different of a video than I normally do, but I thought it would be interesting to do an about me video. And this one might be a little lengthy, so be prepared to go on this journey with me. This video is going to mainly discuss Lyme disease, my health journey, but also what I like to do, hobbies, things like that. So I'll start off by saying I'm Brittany. If you're here, you may already know that, but if not, hello. I am 31, I think. I lose track of my age a lot. And I'm not going to say where I live for safety reasons, but I live in North Carolina. We'll leave it at that. So I am from the South, born and raised. I have one full sibling and a lot of step siblings. I am engaged to marry my best friend. We have a little corgi named Appa who is the baby. We just adore him. So what I like to do is typically I love to paint. I love to do anything tedious in craft. I like to do anything that's tedious and it involves crafting. I like to challenge myself when it comes to crafting, trying new things as far as sewing, painting, doing DIY, I can't talk today, DIY flips. They don't always turn out exactly how I want, but I enjoy it, so there's that. The reason I guess this is important, the reason I started a YouTube journey, I can't talk today, so we're just going to ignore that and act like you understand what I'm saying, and all will be well. That's why I started my YouTube journey. So I have always worked customer service. I enjoy it. I'm good at it. But I'm trying to find a way to kind of make my own schedule, work from home a little more, and take care of my body. So I guess I'll start from the beginning of where all that took place, from then into where I am now. Back in 2000, I'm not good with dates, so 2014 or 15. I want to say 2015. Maybe 2016. Anyway, one of those years. I got bit by something. Thought it was a spider. That's all we found. But I started developing, I was really drowsy a lot. I had a lot of joint pain. Started developing mood swings, and I'm gonna say this story is very long, and sometimes when I'm explaining it I remember something else, so if it jumps around a little bit, I'm sorry, but there are important parts to things that I may miss that I have to jump back to. But anyway, I developed, but before that, see, this is happening. So when I got bit, they thought I had MRSA, so I had to get an oral and topical antibiotic, and that got rid of it. Thankfully, it developed a skin infection, so like when one would go away, another area would pop up, and it was gross. It was the dead of summer, and it was very frustrating. But anyway, I took the antibiotics, and all was well, and I started having those symptoms of joint pain, fatigue, and I wrote all of it off to the medication I was on, or like the jobs I was doing, because I actually did a truck for the job I was working at the time, so I would like unload trucks, and as small as I am and as big as those boxes were, I mean, it made sense. And my mom also has rheumatoid arthritis. It runs pretty deeply in my family, so I was thinking, oh, maybe that's what's going on. I don't know. But I just kind of like persevered, because that's what we do as humans. And I then developed, so I took medication my entire life for anxiety. I have obsessive compulsive disorder. I was diagnosed with it at a very young age. It was quite intense at a very young age. And so because of that, I had to be on medication at a very young age for this. I also was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder and panic disorder and ADHD, I believe, as a kid. So I had a lot of panic attacks. I was a very anxious child, but it's kind of still an anxious adult, but maybe in a more logical way. So I was on this medication that I had been on for a few years that really worked wonders for me. I loved it. Minimal side effects. It really helped me feel like I could function. And then one day it felt like that. Like one day it just stopped working. I was at work. I had a panic attack. I called my sister freaking out. I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with me. Because you got to keep in mind that because I was on that medication, I didn't really have a panic attack like that since I was like a kid. So it was quite overwhelming. I didn't know what was happening. So I go to my doctor and I'm like, look, I don't think this medication is working anymore. And he says, okay, well, we'll put you on something else. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying I'm not going to mention any of the medications that I had issues with. And the reason I'm doing that is because they do work well for other people, and I don't want it to hinder someone else in their mental health journey or health journey in general, because I don't want someone to think, oh, I'm not going to now take that medication because it didn't work for her. Well, just because it doesn't work for me doesn't mean it won't work for you. So I'm not going to mention any medications for that fact, because I don't want people to have a misconception that if it didn't work for me, it won't work for you. So he put me on a new medication. I kind of thought it was working. I don't really know. I remember knowing that it would take a little bit of time for me to adjust with it. So I was just kind of like, okay, well, I'll just see how this does. And then that's when I started really developing mood swings. And I was always pretty a pretty level person, other than a kid. When I was a kid, I was kind of an ass, but I was always pretty level, as far as anger. And I started flipping out on the people close to me. And so I went back to my doctor and I'm like, look, something's wrong with me. I'm screaming at him, which was my ex-fiance at the time. I'm screaming at him. This isn't like me. He went with me. He's like, yeah, this is not really in her character. So the doctor was like, okay, to be fair, I saw a doctor I probably shouldn't have seen for mental health related things. I am a strong believer in you go to a mental health doctor for mental health, but I went to my primary and he gave me another medication that really worked. It worked really well, but it gave me horrendous migraines. And after 2 weeks and popping medication every day to fix the headaches that wasn't going away, I said, I can't take this. So I came off of it. And at the time, I was still going through some anxiety. And me and my ex-fiance were in the process of moving. So we were going to move to the mountains of North Carolina to be with some of my family. He had got a job opportunity. And so we did. We moved. And then a week or two later, I actually developed appendicitis. So I had to be rushed to the emergency room and have my appendix removed. So that was fun. Good times. I had an allergic reaction to the CT dye. And I also had issues after that where I was having trouble breathing. And I would contact the doctors because I was using a inhaler. It didn't help. And I'm like, this is weird. But again, I'd never had surgery before. So I'm like, is this just my reaction to how surgery affected my body? I don't know. So after a few days, that went away. But then I started... Again, we go back to the medications. There's a lot of things happening in this small period of time. The medication isn't helping me at this point. It's making my OCD worse. The sense of the medication was making me worse. It was bad. So I went back to my doctor and I'm like, this isn't working, and they upped the dose. So when they upped the dose, I started noticing that I was having issues with my legs. So when I would sleep, they would kind of flail around. And one day it got to the point where my whole body was shaking. And this wasn't a panic attack shaking. This was Parkinson's. And we went to breakfast and I told my mom, I'm like, something's wrong. I've never had this before. I've never shaken like this before. I have no control over my nervous system. What's going on? So keep in mind as well, when we moved up there, I had health insurance, but it was only accepted. It wasn't, the health insurance I had through where I lived before wasn't accepted where I moved. So that made finding a primary and getting treatment a little more difficult because I might as well not have had insurance, right? So my mom takes me to the emergency room and they find out that I have serotonin syndrome, which means that my brain had too much serotonin and it was making me really sick. So I had, at that point, they told me I have to come down off of the medication a little bit, and they gave me another medication to help my nervous system. And at this point, I'm so fed up with it. I had been on SSRIs for 15 years, and I was like, I just want to figure out how to cope with these things on my own. I'm an adult now. So anyone who's ever taken antidepressants, and again, I hope this doesn't force someone away from antidepressants, because if you need them, please take them. But I had really bad withdrawals. 15 years of mind-altering medications. It was not a great time. I had brain zaps. I felt really weird. Like I remember having memory issues to the point where I was trying to, I was doing dishes and I was trying to, I had just taken the old filter out of the coffee maker and just that quick forgot how to put it back in. And I remember telling my mom, I was like, this is odd. I'm having some issues with my memory. And she was like, well, it's probably just coming down from those medications. I'm like, you know what? You're probably right. Like, my brain is probably just misfiring. So we go through this, and I go through my few weeks of withdrawal. I really feel like it took about a year for my brain to actually get back to where it was supposed to be. And during this time, I had even more anxiety. I felt really weird, and I didn't realize that a lot of that probably had to do with me coming off of a brain medication I'd been on for so long. I wasn't getting the same amount of serotonin. So I withdrawing, and then I start noticing, we moved from my grandmother's house to a house that my mom purchased. And I started noticing that I was having, I remember going up to my mom in the kitchen saying, I feel like I'm getting the flu. And I started feeling this way for a few days, and finally I went back to the ER because, again, might as well not have had health insurance, so I didn't have a primary that I could call. Good luck going to Quick Care, without insurance. It's going to cost you a ton of money. So I went, and they ran 2 flu swabs. And I would feel so bad. I literally would lay in the bed like crying. It was like the flu times 10. I've never experienced that. It was just bad. So the doctor was like, you don't have the flu, but have you been bit by a tick? Now keep in mind, I'd heard of Lyme disease. I didn't really fully know what it was. So I was like, not that I'm aware of. And he was like, well, if you did, you may have Lyme disease. That would explain feeling like you have the flu. And I'm like, okay, thanks, Doc, for putting that on my radar, because I didn't know. So me and my family were researching it, and I met a few people in my area, who have Lyme disease through a support group, and started learning way more about it and how hard it is to get treatment, how hard it is to get the right testing. So I was prepared off the gate. And so for the next few weeks, I worked my way into getting a primary physician, because I knew I needed to be seen. At this time, during those weeks of waiting to see them, I took a notebook and I wrote down every single symptom I had. And I'm telling you, there were like 3 pages front to back, full of just random things that and I went from being pretty healthy. Like I had some low blood sugar, I had some anxiety, but physically I was always pretty healthy. So this was very different for me. This was just like a flip. So I go to the doctor, and I'm telling the PA, I'm like, this is what's going on. I'm like, I'm having low-grade fever, swollen lymph nodes, my legs hurt, I feel like I have the flu. The flu tests are negative. I don't know what's going on. And she was really, she listened, and she felt like, a throat, and she could feel it. She's like, yeah, you have something going on. She's like, we'll send you. She's named all these specialists. And I'm like, okay, well, at least I'm being heard. So I knew that could take time. So I remember walking out of her office and almost falling out, heading to the lobby, and I didn't say anything to anyone. I'm like, they're working on it. Let me just get home. At this point, waiting to hear back from these specialists, I was driving, and I would forget where I was. Now, keep in mind, these are areas that I'd grown up around. I knew where I was. Like, I know these areas. And I would pull up at, say, Walmart and look around and didn't recognize anything around me. It was like, it was the strangest situation. And I went back to the doctor and I'm like, look, I need you to test me for Lyme disease, like, now. I was like, because I have a bite and I'm 27 years old and my memory is going on me randomly. This isn't normal. I shouldn't be sick like this. I shouldn't be running fevers and having these joint pain and feeling so fatigued and having all these infections and then my memory go. And he agreed at this point that, like, yeah, let's do something. So he runs it and I have to wait a few days to hear back. And I did hear back. Sorry guys, my camera was dying. So they, the test came back positive, CDC positive for Lyme disease. I want to note something that I forgot to note in the video. When my Lyme test came back positive, it came back positive for, so the way Lyme works is you have old and new. So in your blood work, this happens for like other things too, kind of like Epstein-Barr, mycoplasma pneumonia or something like that. Those are co-infections to Lyme. So when you can just have Lyme, but a lot of times there's co-infections that go along with Lyme that can make you sicker than the Lyme. So there's IgM and IgG. I cannot remember which is new and which was old, but my markers showed up that I had old Lyme, meaning we don't know when I actually got sick with it and how long my body was like keeping it in check before it came to the surface. So it could have been that I got bit by Lyme years ago, got Lyme years ago, and my immune system was like well enough to keep it in check. We don't know. Now, keep in mind, it's very hard to get a CDC positive for Lyme. Not super common, and I cried. I was like, I knew I wasn't crazy because I had a lot of people in my life who were like, your blood work keeps coming back fine. Like, are you sure this isn't a mental health issue? And I was like, I'm not crazy. Like, something is wrong. So when I got this news, I'm like, okay, I knew I wasn't crazy. Now let's get treatment. Let's get me back to who I am and where I need to be. So the doctor said, we'll send you to an infectious disease specialist. They can treat this and all is well. I'm like, okay. So again, I wait. And the infectious disease doctor contacts me and they say, they're refusing to see you. They believe your test is a false positive. Keep in mind, guys, I never even looked at them. Went in their office. They never even listened to my symptoms. They were just like, no, you don't have it. And I'm like, I'm over here like super sick. So at this point, I was defeated. So I get back on my support group and I'm like, where do I go? How do I get treatment? And they told me about seeing an LLMD, which is a Lyme literate medical doctor. I reach out to a few. I see a few. The ones I saw were like, yes, absolutely. You have Lyme disease. You can see it in the blood work. You have the symptoms. Let's get you treatment. Eventually, I turned to natural treatments, which seemed to work wonders for me because at this time, I don't know if it was because of Lyme or whatever I had going on, almost everything I took, I seemed to have a reaction to. Whether it was antibiotics, whether it was medication for my stomach, I would have allergic reactions, and it would come to a point where I was like, I don't want this anymore. So I went natural. I treated homeopathically, and I did well. I herxed. Anyone who has Lyme knows what that is, but I'll explain. It's a die-off. So essentially when you're killing the bacteria, it dumps this. So think of, and I'm not comparing Lyme disease to cancer, so please don't think that. When I say this, I'm just using this as an example. When you have cancer and you have to take chemo, you're going to feel worse before you feel better. You're going to have symptoms from the chemotherapy. Lyme is the same in the sense of when you get treatment, you're going to feel worse before you feel better. So I did. I remember at one point, I couldn't stand for longer than like 10 minutes. I spent most of my months in the bed with random pains and just severely weak. So when I finally started feeling better, I moved back here to my hometown with my dad and stepmom, and I was, got back to work, and things were great, and I started having a plethora of other symptoms. And I, again, was back and forth with doctors, and I guess this video is going to be me being really vulnerable and telling the world everything I have going on. But hey, it is what it is. I will have to say that I hate this misconception that just because you're young, you're healthy, because it's not always true. So I will step back and say that there is certain illnesses that run in my mom's side of the family. Rheumatoid arthritis. My mom herself has 3 autoimmune diseases. My sister has Chiari malformation of the brain, where she has had to have 3 brain surgeries and a shunt put in. So I was diagnosed with a gene mutation back when I saw a Lyme doctor, because they did run a lot more detailed tests and get more into the genetic side of things. So I have a gene mutation, and it recently, as of late, within the last month, I developed I'm jumping all over the place. Since Lyme, I developed stroke-like symptoms, where the left side of my body would kind of get weak. I would get really slurred speech, confused, out of it, and they have done multiple MRIs and issues with my legs. Come to find out, I have prolapsing in my female area. I've never had children. I have hernia that I was born with, and then I have cysts that have developed behind my knees, which sometimes feel like my knee is going to give out, so that's fun. But just recently I went to the neurologist. I had to have an emergency MRI on my neck due to some issues I was having with my shoulder and weakness and numbness, not numbness, but like weakness in my hand. And they found that I also have mild Chiari malformation of the brain, and I had 3 cysts on my upper spine that are filled with spinal fluid and surround the nerves of the spine. I've been back and forth with my neurologist a lot. It seems that a lot of what I deal with now is probably more genetic than it is from Lyme. It could be that Lyme, and also have an EBV, which is Epstein-Barr virus. It was kind of crazy in a sense when he told me that, because when I went to get this emergency MRI, the doctor comes in and they're like, okay, well, you don't have to have surgery. That's great. And I'm like, yeah, that's really great. She's like, but you have this thing, the base of your skull, And the way she explained it, I was like, that sounds like Chiari, but how you're saying it doesn't sound like Chiari. She's like, can you have, cyst on your spine, but that's not super uncommon. I'm like, okay. So, of course, I immediately, I go home and I think over what I'm told, and I call my sister, and she's trying to, process this and process what I've been told. And then I see my neurologist, who immediately says, yeah, you have mild Chiari malformation of the brain. Now, keep in mind, I've had multiple CT scans due to the stroke-like symptoms and multiple MRIs. And the Chiari has been there this whole time. Not like whole time as in my whole life, I don't know that. But the past couple MRIs, it's been there, and they kept saying to me, you don't have Chiari, you don't have Chiari. There's no evidence of Chiari until this MRI of my spine. And they're like, oh yeah, you have mild Chiari. And I'm like, okay. So this whole time I thought I was in the clear with that, at least. I watched what my sister went through. I'm like, in the clear with that, and I'm not. I mean, I am, but I'm not. It's not bad enough for surgery, which is incredible, and I'm so thankful and blessed from that. But it does go to show that you have to be your own advocate, though. Like, you have to keep pushing. Like, and my neurologist is incredible. I love him. He has never stopped searching and because of him giving me the MRIs I need, we found it. If I saw a neurologist that didn't care to hear me out, may have never known that I had cysts on my spine and all those things. So there also is a concern for a spinal fluid leak. I get positional headaches. They're really bad. Right now I'm doing okay, but I have days, weeks, where the only time I don't have a headache is when I lay flat. I explained this to my neurologist, and he said that sounds like a spinal fluid leak. Which, come to find out, a lot of people who have this type of cyst on their spine that I have, it's very common with spinal fluid leaks and Chiari. So right now we're in the process of, this is where I am today. So I saw my neurologist yesterday. I'm waiting to get insurance so that I can get an MRI with dye. He said the dye will have more of a chance of showing a leak. And if it doesn't show a leak, I have to go to Duke. Which is fine. Before I got sick with Lyme, I didn't have the same type of outlook on my life and my journey that I have now. And I was having this conversation with my mom yesterday. I think in a way, this has kind of helped my anxiety. By the way, I haven't been on anxiety medicine in 4 years. So that is amazing. It's a good goal for me. But I think it's helped my anxiety in a sense of that I've had to really have to rationalize, like, things and acknowledge that, like, this is my journey. Somebody else's journey is their own journey. Like, I think sometimes it's really easy for people to get really down on themselves and look like I get defeated sometimes too. I'm like, she said something else. But then I have to remember, like, for me, like, but I'm still very blessed in a lot of ways. Like, I have an amazing fiance, I have an amazing family, I have an amazing support system. And I have people now on my team that I didn't feel like I had a lot of people on my team before, especially people that I needed on my team. My family's always been pretty supportive, but there has always been kind of question to the validity of what I had or what I was going through. And I've learned in my 31 years and in the past 2 years probably. And I hope this message reaches you in the same way, whether it's health issues you have going on, marital issues, religious, whatever you have going on. Your story doesn't have to be validated by anyone. You know yourself more than anyone. A lot of times people project their own insecurities onto you. And that's not your responsibility to, like, deal with their stuff. Sorry. What your job is to take care of you and being self-aware. For me, I've had to learn when to be self-aware. When am I panicking? Or when am I to a point of being in an acceptance stage? I think I'm hopefully closer to the acceptance stage of a lot of things. But I think with illness in specific, it becomes difficult because when you are young and I've had people say to me, well, you seem healthy. Like, well, yeah, because don't like to be considered a weak person. When I am in front of someone, I want to act like I am normal to them, right? I don't want them to think, I'm not one to want to, like, lay down and just mope in what I'm going through. That gets us nowhere. Now, don't get me wrong, I've had days where, yeah, I've been sad. But you don't unpack and live there, right? Like, you're sad for a minute, you deal with your issues, and you go on about life, because me doing that is not going to change what's happening to me. But here's the issue and with where that lies. If you look healthy and you say you're sick, you're faking it. And I want you guys to really sit with this for a minute, okay? But if you're sick and you act sick, you want attention. Mind-blowing, right? There's no right way for other people to validate your sickness, right? There's no right way for you to please everyone. So for me, all I do is I try to live my life the best way I can, take care of my body the best way I can, and be a positive person. Not sit and mope and say, why me? Because clearly God gave me this journey for a reason. Just like he gave everyone else their own journey for a reason. There's a reason for it. Whether it's to help other people, which is what I hope this video does, or to whatever that is. I just think we have to be careful thinking that life hands us a shit card, because sometimes flowers are covered in poo, you know what I mean? Just because your dog took a poo on that flower doesn't mean it's not still a flower. That was a really weird representation, but you get what I mean. So I think I was at a point in my life where I've been not really hiding, kind of more of a private person than people would probably believe. I'm not super open on social media about everything that I deal with, because to me it's really none of anyone's business. It starts to become a problem when you aren't open about those things and people just don't believe you at this point. They're like, well, you seem fine. Well, it's because I don't owe you anything, right? You don't owe anyone anything. You don't owe them an explanation. You don't owe them a copy of your MRIs. You don't owe anyone that. And I think when we as humans get to the point where we can be just happy with who we are and accepting with what we know for ourselves and our people know, we become happier. I know I have. I've become happier because I will not, how do I say this? I won't surround myself with people who deflate what I deal with. I just won't. And no matter how much I love you, it's self-preservation. You don't know what I deal with. So it's unfair. I can't look at you and say, you don't have headaches. That's just the first thing. You don't have headaches. Well, how the f do I know if you have headaches or not? I don't know. You don't hurt all the time. Well, maybe you do. I don't know. Maybe you're just really, really good at hiding what you deal with every day. Some of us are masters at that. Some of us have become very recluse in who we trust information with because of how we're treated. And anyway, I was just wanting to kind of be honest and put my truth out there, because as much as I like my privacy, there are some things that make it a little harder to hide. When you're going through things, sometimes you just want to talk to people, and things start to add up a little more to people on the outside that you care about and that you want it to make sense for. But all we can do is be good people, do the job that we're put on this earth to do, and live every day happy. I hope this was informative. I don't really have much more to add, I think, because we're just kind of where I am now is what I'd already mentioned. So I'm going to leave it at saying that if you have anything you're going through in your life, it doesn't have to be illness. It could be an abusive relationship. It can be a partner who gaslights you. It can be a family member who gaslights you. It could be a crappy work experience, a job that you're at, whatever. You don't have to stay there. You don't have to stay around people who make you feel like how you feel doesn't matter and what you're going through isn't real. And I know sometimes it's really hard to cut people out that you really love. But you also have to remember self-preservation. Just as much as you want to be there for others, you have to be there for yourself. I'm at a point in my life where I love people so much. But as soon as you start deflating how I feel, I'm out. You know, you start trying to tell me what I'm going through isn't real, I'm out. Because to me, unless you've sat with me at every single doctor's appointment and have looked at every single one of my images and have had the conversations I've had with my doctors, I don't care. I just don't. Your opinion is invalid to me. Speak from situations you don't know about. So anyway, I love you guys. I hope this reaches you well, and I hope that you guys are kind to it, because this was a video I was kind of anxious about doing due to my past and how sometimes things were received. But I guess I'm at that point where I don't care. So I love you guys. Thank you so much.